I want to take a moment to address a common question that often comes up at this point in the material. So we've been talking about cutoff cues and ways that we can reinforce cutoff cues. And I'm frequently asked if, since what we are doing is looking for signs that the dog is insecure and then rewarding those signs by giving the dog space, does that basically mean that we are rewarding the dog for being fearful? And does that mean that the dog is going to become more fearful? And so there's a few different levels on which I want to address this problem. I'm going to start with the idea of rewarding fear and whether or not we can reward fear and then make it more severe. And so let me just start by saying, as kind of a blanket statement, that we cannot reward states of mind. We can reward behaviors, and we can reward behaviors that are associated with a state of mind, but we can't really reward the state of mind itself because states of mind are somewhat involuntary, right? So take, for example, a scenario where a dog is frightened. If I give that dog a cookie, the dog is not going to say, well, geez, you gave me a cookie for being afraid. Well, then I'm going to be afraid more. I'm going to be afraid next time. It doesn't really work that way. We can't turn fear on and off consciously, right? So if I was really nervous about being in the dark, for instance, and every time you turn the lights out, you gave me a $50 bill, that's not going to make me more afraid of the dark. If anything, it'll have the opposite effect, where I might become tolerant of the dark because it's been associated with things that are pleasant and things that I like. And so I could become less afraid, but at the very least, I might still be afraid, but be tolerant of that fear because it's worth dealing with to achieve the reward. So, if a dog, for instance, out of fear starts lunging, and we reward the dog for lunging a lot, we can have a scenario where the dog begins lunging more, but they're doing it out of a different motive. And so it might start looking different, right? Because you don't have that emotional context to it. You just have a dog who's going, bark, bark, bark. Do I get something now, right? So we're basically encouraging that behavior, but not necessarily the state of mind, if that makes sense. However, we can reinforce state of minds, and we can do that through validation, right? So this is a very important distinction to make between rewarding a state of mind and reinforcing a state of mind. As dog trainers, for instance, we often hear the statement, or we often say the statement, not to pet a dog who's nervous because you're going to be rewarding the dog for being nervous, right? And that's not really a 100% accurate statement. Right? As I just discussed, we can't really reward nervousness. It doesn't really work out that way. However, we can validate nervousness. And the problem is that the average person who begins petting their nervous dog does so with a body language and an energy that is somewhat soft and, from the dog's perspective, somewhat weak, right? And so now the dog's in a predicament where they're in a scenario that makes them afraid. Let's say it's an oncoming dog, right? Here comes a dog, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden my human or my handler, who is supposed to be the one that keeps me safe and sort of directs the show, all of a sudden they, on seeing this other dog, also become very soft and weak. And so as the dog, I may look at that and say, wow, this thing really affects me negatively and also affects my handler negatively. I knew I had a reason to be afraid. And so it's not that they're being rewarded for fear, but our behavior and our energy is validating their fear, and because it's validating the fear, it's reinforcing it.